My name is Unnikrishnan and I work as the head of the climate change section at the Commonwealth Secretariat. We have a flagship initiative called the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub that support member countries in access to climate finance, especially the small and vulnerable countries. And so I'm right now based in London and been working in the Secretariat since 2019. And so we'll look forward to a very fruitful interaction with you. Thank you very much.
Hello, Honorable Solloway. Thank you for your time and opportunity to have this conversation. It's a pleasure and honor to meet you. I'm Leba Gaunavinka. I'm a Fijian, lived and worked mostly in Fiji and the Pacific region. Had my education in Japan, then moved back home, worked for the government and regional agencies here before joining UNISAT on the UK Space Agency funded IPP CommonSensing project as their in-country technical staff. I'm embedded in the climate change and international cooperation division of our Ministry of Economy. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and I'm delighted to meet you both. Sounds very lovely. What's it like? What's the weather like there, Leba? Made me really unhappy. What's everything like there?
Fijian winter at the moment, so it's our cold season. Just prepping for cyclone season in a few months.
No. Well, look, it's really lovely to meet you both. It would be fantastic if you can just maybe talk me through the problem that your project is trying to address, and maybe just give me an overview of the program that you're doing. I know you mentioned the rough outline, but maybe a bit more would be really helpful.
The CommonSensing initiative that the Commonwealth Secretariat is part of is basically aimed at establishing a satellite data-based platform which helps the member countries in taking quick decisions on climate action. So the role that the Commonwealth Secretariat is playing here is that we know there is an increasing impact of climate change on the small island states. And of course, each extreme event we are seeing is causing a big dent in the GDP of the member countries. So obviously, we know the impact is severe, and we know that there is a need for more financing to support member countries to deal with the situation. But the problem that the member countries are facing is that how to access this finance, especially the limited finance available, and to make the impact happen in the member countries. So this project is heavily focused on utilizing satellite data to develop evidence-based to support member countries in submitting proposals. So the model that we follow here is the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub positions long-term climate finance advisors to the member country government ministries to support the ministries in taking the access to finance forward. So we've been working with the three Pacific countries, Fiji, Vanuatu, and Solomon Islands, along with the other 12 member countries in the Caribbean, Pacific, and in the African region. So far we have, as part of this program, supported member countries in accessing around $43.8 million US dollar worth of projects, and we are trying to utilize this platform for the benefit of these three countries going forward. Yeah, I'm sure Leba will have more to add.
Thank you, Uni. Yes, essentially, CommonSensing ultimately targets building climate resilience in the context of climate change. And in Fiji, we have the intensifying impacts of climate change still poses an urgent threat to Fiji's development ambitions. We're a small island nation of around less than 1 million people. There's all these climate risks that communities directly face, impacting their livelihoods and security, which government has the challenge of addressing and bringing innovative strategies and partnerships that will enable them to tackle these issues. And in order to identify and invest in solutions and projects or programs that improve this infrastructure, there's always the need for Earth observation, remote sensing technology and training support, especially for small island economies like Fiji, to strengthen capacities to be able to manage these risks better. And there tends to be a heavy dependence on experts and consultants on the applications of this technology So there's some capacity, but its uptake is limited. And then there's this disconnect as well between the tools and the sector experts that CommonSensing bridges, to really enable the uptake of this technology and information to strengthen resilience planning and response at the national level.
So how do you do that then? I'm just intrigued. So what are you doing? Are you using, did you say using satellites to do it? How do you do it? Do you just read data? What exactly goes off, Leba?
So on one hand, we have this the development of this geospatial data and systems, and then on the other hand, we have the climate financing components of the project that ingests this climate and geospatial data sets into bankable climate financing proposals to support these feasible programs that build resilience. And parallel to that, we have capacity building activities that's implemented by all the partners involved in their various areas of expertise. So
I'm really intrigued. Sorry, it just sounds fascinating. So what's your typical day, Leba? What do you do? Do you look at screens? I mean, what is your typical day?
We are working with the 7 implementing agencies to fine-tune or customize these tools and data sets to be useful for local applications. And at the same time, the CommonSensing project is providing technical GIS support, Earth observation support, and we bring in these imageries as well as analysis-ready products, or what we call analysis-ready data sets through this open data cube, where you can easily extract information that would have otherwise, you would need specialists to be generating. So you can query the platform, the Open Data Cube platform, and then generate analysis-ready products like shoreline detection over a certain period of time. If you want to look at 10 or 20 years backwards, how has the shoreline for this particular island? So we have some communities that are requesting the government to be relocated to, safer alternative sites. So we need evidence bases to say that, okay, their shoreline is retreating, or it's either receding, or it's so using one of the products like the shoreline extraction data sets from the Open Data Cube of the CommonSensing, you can confirm this, like over the 10-year period, this is how much it has shifted.
Has it shifted a lot then over the 10-year period?
So yeah, mostly we can test that for the communities that's been flagged as that's been listed under government's priority to be relocated.
Gosh. But really interesting. What are the biggest challenges that you've encountered so far doing this project?
Yeah, I think
the COVID pandemic. Maybe Unyal.
Yeah.
It's primarily we have the issue with the pandemic.
That's a very, very important question, and then we are trying to find solutions to some of them. So I think one of the major bottlenecks in this project is the capacity to build the capacities of the officials in the government, and also to build the capacities of multiple stakeholders who are dealing with this, because we find from the multilateral funds like the Green Climate Fund or the Adaptation Fund of the UN, the most difficult part of dealing with access to finance for small states is basically their inability to submit tangible proposals. So we need to work with them in building their capacities in terms of supporting them in submitting the proposals that goes through the rigorous process of approval. But what we have found is that, yes, as Leba said, COVID was a disruption because generally we follow an approach of right shop, where people sit down with the expert and try to work on their proposals, and it's almost like a process of learning by doing, which ideally would have been more convenient to be done physically in the place, seeing the location, etc. But unfortunately, that's something which was a disruption in the whole process. But at the same time, the whole process of approvals also got a bit delayed in the process in between, because of the pandemic, and of course the kind of prioritization of member countries to move into the socio-economic issues than to the adaptation issues. So these are some of the challenges that we face within the project.
Leba, I think you were going to say something as well.
And there's also this evidence-based data that are often, usually time-consuming and resource-intensive to gather for such analysis. When through the CommonSensing project is one way we can generate these information products pretty easily to help the government. We also supporting the government with like activation of the International Space Charter during disasters. So in 2020, we had 2 back-to-back severe tropical cyclones, and we activated the International Space Charter to help with post-disaster mapping.
Well, that's really interesting. So as a result of what you were doing, were you able to save lives? I mean, what was the impact of what you did?
So within the first 48 hours, we need to be able to deploy relief and aid to the most affected communities, and directing what goes where. We need to sort of have an inventory within the first 24 hours, so various development partners can mobilize their teams on the ground to support these efforts, the response planning. So within that first 24 to 48 hours, we need to generate an assessment, post-disaster assessment, estimating the number of damages in all these villages and communities.
Really interesting.
And this is given to the deployed teams.
Yeah. It was also all the more important when this multi-impact situation impacted. For example, when the tropical cyclone Harold hit, or the cyclone Amphan hit, there was also COVID there. So it was actually very helpful for the communities to decide as to which are the high wind velocity zones, so that how can we relocate people, looking at the social distancing norms and others. So that was coming very handy when the multi-impact situation hits.
So how did this research help people social distance? I don't understand.
So basically, we need to know exactly, because I think in the tropical cyclone Amphan, it was seen that the assessment gave a very clear picture that what are the kind of locations where you have the high wind velocity, where people need to be relocated. So rather than relocating in en masse, the information available was used to support member countries in terms of relocating the people who are highly impacted, rather than relocating everyone in one go and making a big stress on the administration. So the phased relocation was very helpful, and that avoided a lot of mortalities, and of course supported in moving in a phased manner.
Well, that's really, really interesting. It's a real live example. And obviously we've got COP26 coming up later this year, and it's a chance to, accelerate and inspire action around the world. What action or impact do you expect your research to have in the long term?
Two very good initiatives that the COP26 is trying to bring up in terms of the task force on access to climate finance, where there's a very clear mention that the COP will look at existing initiatives and existing successful models. So definitely, I think CommonSensing is a successful initiative and a successful model that could get replicated in many other regions, including the African and the Caribbean regions. At the same time, there's also the kind of adaptation action justification, or the planning process, which is going on in many countries. So this ground level data and evidences are going to be highly supportive in taking decisions for member countries.
Maybe I can add a case in point with one of the pipeline projects, which is community relocation. We have around 40 communities that are flagged to be relocated, and the government needs a sort of a vetting criteria to prioritize which community is most urgently needs this. And we had the CommonSensing project had deployed a national level risk index, which currently compares risks at the administrative national subnational level, and we are scaling this at the moment to reflect risks at the community level, to compare risks in the dimensions of risk in terms of this community versus that community, in terms of their exposure to hazards, their specific vulnerabilities, and their lack of coping capacities, to bring out or to highlight what interventions would be suitable for each community, while prioritizing which ones the government need to relocate first.
I'm really interested, and I guess this may be a question, say, again for you, Nanda, but what is it that drives you to do all of this? I mean, how did you get into this, and how did you start doing this all those years ago? Or
yeah. So maybe one experience that we have observed from member countries is basically the number of or the number of iterations that the small state does to successfully take a project forward, especially to have impact at scale. So we've seen that a non-availability of data and also the interpretation of data to more justifiable information in the project proposals is one of the major bottlenecks in successfully accessing climate finance, which is actually a need for implementing the plans that the member countries have developed. So I see that as one of the driving force behind utilizing this platform to generate unbiased data that will support the member countries in giving the correct justification to access projects. Yeah.
So my question, that's really interesting, but my question was, what drives you personally, Leba, as an example? So what is it that made you get interested in this, first of all?
I guess at the gist of it, it's to bring innovation or apply these tools, which I'm passionate about, which is remote sensing applications, to make a difference in my community. Yeah? So it's to improve situations for our local communities. I guess that's at the gist of it.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And do you think then that all of this will have a long-term impact?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a lot of innovative applications, and there's a lot of linkages that the CommonSensing project has created with sectors that previously didn't really utilize as much Earth observation data as they, could really use, like climate and health sector, the climate change and health sector in Fiji. And yeah. I've always, wanted to be in on efforts that make impactful contributions to communities, which is why I was a civil servant and worked for the 2 regional agencies that I could provide that sort of support. And now joining the UN through this CommonSensing project, it has the same impact. And yeah. I think it's one of the most fun jobs in the world.
So, and Uni, is your job fun as well?
Yeah, I think basically as a citizen of the Commonwealth, and I've seen the way that the climate change debate has progressed over the years. So it's basically an interest to contribute to the solutions, especially when member countries. So I belong to India. So I've seen like how the processes emerged there over the period of time, and definitely have been part of some of the processes. So the interest is basically to take it to other regions, and of course to see whether the expertise could be of benefit for the member countries of the Commonwealth.
And what do you think is the most important thing that we can do to have a positive impact on climate change? So
I think more of localized planning and centralized solutions, actually, because till the time the solutions are not adapted to the local situation, it is not going to fetch the results. So obviously more of participatory planning is what is needed to have what you call impact at the ground level, because we all know that climate change is going to happen, and of course the vulnerable communities need to adapt. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, and what do you mean when you say we all know climate change is going to happen? What do you mean? Is it because it's kind of happening already? What do you mean is going to happen?
So the impact of climate change on the communities is bound to happen, because looking at the development paradigm that we're looking at, basically the emissions are on the rise, and of course the impact of climate change is definitely going to be there. So the vulnerable communities need to adapt, and for them to adapt and to implement the planning, implement the measures in the ground, definitely more participatory planning is needed in coordination with the local communities.
Yeah, and what are those measures?
So decentralized planning. So for example, many member countries are coming up with localized planning, because There is already the national action plans on climate change. There is also the subnational action plans on climate change. But now more localized action plans are coming, and also decentralized decision making in terms of climate finance. So for example, the Green Climate Fund has come up with a window which enables more direct routing of financial resources more to the direct beneficiaries rather than taking it to multiple levels. So these are some of the measures where we get a more inclusive way of dealing with the crisis or the issue.
Thank you. And Leba, anything, we're nearly at the end, but anything else to say? I think what you're doing is incredible, and thank you for that.
Maybe I would just like to add, we're very grateful for the CommonSensing project bringing all these various expertise to develop these partnerships that allow us to widely use these shared benefits and lessons learned and best practices. And the approach that CommonSensing has taken in really investing in interventions that trickles down to community impact, with targeted interventions that feed into government's holistic approach. It's an enabling project that I think has, long-term, it works pretty well for us in the long term.
No, that's fantastic. It's really great. Thank you so much for your time. I never know where half an hour goes on these meetings, but that is really, really interesting. It's been an absolute pleasure to meet you both. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.